The call from my bank came 2 hours after our family reunion ended. At first, I thought it was fraud protection. Technically, it was. The representative asked if I had authorized several large transfers. I hadn't. My stomach dropped as I opened my banking app. The account I'd spent 15 years building was nearly empty. When I confronted my family, my brother-in-law didn't even deny it. He leaned back in his chair and laughed. "We needed it more than you." Then my relatives called me selfish for filing a report. What happened next changed every relationship in that room forever. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and for most of my life, my family treated responsibility like a punishment. The more dependable you were, the more people expected from you. And nobody was more dependable than me. At 37, I owned a successful accounting and financial consulting firm. I worked hard, saved carefully, planned everything. The result was a comfortable life that I had built entirely on my own. Unfortunately, my family saw that success differently. To them, my savings weren't mine. They were a resource, a backup plan, an emergency fund everyone else could access whenever they needed help. Especially my brother-in-law, Ryan. Ryan had a unique talent for turning bad decisions into family emergencies. New business ideas, expensive purchases, poor financial planning. There was always a reason he needed help. And there was always someone ready to excuse him, usually my sister. Sometimes my parents. Occasionally the entire family. The latest crisis surfaced during our annual family reunion. Everyone gathered at my parents' house for a weekend barbecue. The afternoon started normally. Food. Conversations. Children running through the backyard. Then Ryan started talking about money. Again. He complained about bills. Talked about business setbacks. Mentioned debt collectors. The story sounded familiar because I'd heard versions of it for years. Eventually, the conversation shifted exactly where I knew it would. Toward me. My mother sighed dramatically. "Lauren has always been generous." My sister nodded. "She's in a position to help." Ryan looked directly at me. "It would only be temporary." Temporary. The same word he'd used 3 years earlier. And 2 years before that. And several times in between. I set down my drink. Not this time. The table went quiet. Ryan blinked. "What?" I said no. My sister immediately frowned. "Seriously?" I nodded. "I've helped enough." The reaction was instant. My mother looked disappointed. My father shook his head. Ryan laughed bitterly. "I guess success changes people." Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Then came the word I should have expected. Selfish. Not from Ryan. From my sister. The conversation never recovered after that. People tried changing the subject, but the mood had already shifted. By early evening, guests started leaving. I drove home feeling exhausted. Not guilty. Just tired. 2 hours later, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed my bank. At first, I assumed it was routine security verification. Then the representative asked a question that made my stomach drop. "Ms. Mitchell, did you authorize several large transfers from your account today?" I sat upright. No. My hands started shaking as I opened my banking app. The balance stared back at me. Wrong. Terribly wrong. Most of the account was gone. Several transactions had emptied nearly everything. I immediately reviewed the activity. The access method, the timing, the details. Then disbelief turned into something colder. Because the information pointed towards someone who knew me personally. Someone who had access they should never have used. An hour later, I stood in my parents' living room confronting my family. Ryan didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply leaned back and shrugged. "We needed it more than you." The room fell silent. I looked around at every face watching me. Then I quietly said, "Then none of you will mind what happens next." Nobody stopped me as I left my parents' house. Not because they agreed with me, because they assumed I was bluffing. For years, I had been the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the person who avoided conflict whenever possible. They expected another lecture, another warning, another chance. Instead, I drove straight home and filed an official fraud report. The next morning, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, voicemails. My mother was first. Lauren, tell me you didn't actually do it. I did. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Then came the anger. By lunchtime, my father had called twice. My sister had called 6 times. Ryan sent a message claiming everything was a misunderstanding. Apparently, everyone was upset. Not because my account had been drained, because I had reported it. That detail fascinated me. The missing money wasn't the problem. The report was. That evening, my sister arrived at my house unannounced. The moment I opened the door, she started arguing. Withdraw the complaint.
No.
Ryan was going to pay it back. I folded my arms. With what money? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Ryan had no repayment plan. He never did. The next few weeks became increasingly uncomfortable for everyone. Investigators requested records. Banks reviewed transactions. Timelines were established. Documents were examined. Unlike family arguments, financial records don't care about feelings. They only care about facts. And the facts weren't helping Ryan. The deeper the review went, the more questions appeared. Several transfers were larger than originally reported. Additional account activity surfaced. Transactions that nobody had mentioned during the confrontation. Ryan became noticeably nervous. His confidence disappeared. The joke stopped. The smug attitude vanished. Meanwhile, cracks began forming within the family. Relatives who had loudly defended him started asking questions. My aunt called me privately. Ryan told us something completely different. That caught my attention. Apparently, he had told several family members that I had voluntarily loaned him the money. Others were told I had gifted it. Some believed I was exaggerating the amount. Everyone had heard a different story. The only consistent part was that Ryan always looked innocent. That strategy worked until actual records entered the conversation. Facts have a way of ruining carefully constructed stories. Within a month, people who had called me selfish were becoming much quieter. My parents stopped demanding I withdraw the report. My sister stopped defending every explanation Ryan offered. Reality was catching up.
Fast.
Then one afternoon, I received a call from one of the investigators. His tone sounded different. More serious. We've uncovered additional information, he said. I sat forward immediately. What kind of information? There was a brief pause. Then he answered. The account activity appears to be part of a much larger pattern. For the first time since this started, even I was shocked, because whatever they had found, it was something nobody in the family had expected. The meeting took place 6 weeks later. Not in my parents' house. Not around a dinner table. In a professional conference room where facts mattered more than opinions. For the first time since this began, the entire family sat quietly. Nobody was arguing. Nobody was calling me selfish. Nobody was demanding anything. Because everyone knew the investigation had reached its conclusion. Ryan looked completely different from the man who had laughed when I confronted him. The confidence was gone. The arrogance was gone. Even my sister seemed nervous. The investigator opened a folder and began explaining the findings. The room remained silent. Every transaction had been reviewed. Every record verified. Every timeline confirmed. Then came the part nobody expected. The unauthorized transfers from my account weren't an isolated incident. They were part of a larger pattern of financial misconduct. Over several years, Ryan had repeatedly accessed funds and accounts that didn't belong to him. Different situations, different explanations, different excuses, but always the same outcome. Someone else paid the price. My mother looked stunned. My father stared at the table. My sister slowly shook her head. You told me those stories weren't true. Ryan didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. The documents were sitting directly in front of him. Facts don't argue. They simply exist. For years, Ryan had relied on something stronger than evidence. Family loyalty. The assumption that people would protect him before asking questions. That assumption had finally failed. The investigator finished his report and left the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then my father finally broke the silence. He looked older than I had ever seen him. We defended you. Ryan lowered his eyes. My mother looked at me next. There were tears in her eyes. Not because of the investigation, because she finally understood something. I hadn't filed a report to hurt the family. I filed it to protect myself. There was a difference. A huge difference. My sister turned toward me. I'm sorry. The words sounded sincere. Painfully sincere. I thought you were overreacting. I nodded. I know. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Then I stood. Not dramatically. Not triumphantly. Just calmly. I never wanted this. Every face turned toward me. I wanted accountability. The room remained quiet, because deep down, everyone knew that was true. This had never been about revenge. It had never been about punishment. It was about boundaries, about consequences, about refusing to accept behavior simply because it came from family. Trust, once broken, isn't repaired by pretending nothing happened. It starts with honesty. And honesty had finally arrived. As I walked toward the door, nobody tried stopping me. Not because they didn't care. Because there was nothing left to argue about. The truth had already done all the talking. Outside, the evening air felt lighter than it had in months. For the first time since that phone call from the bank, I felt peace. My family called me selfish for protecting what was mine. The truth was, I finally respected myself enough to stop apologizing for it.